Hi everybody! Today we are going to paint a few animal portraits in the same style we explored a few weeks ago. So let's start again with the basics of drawing. We are going to be using photographs as references for all of today's paintings, okay? But I'm not trying to copy them perfectly. Instead, I look for the overall flow of the image. For instance, in this cat, the first thing I notice is that the body forms this S shape, so that becomes my starting point. There are many ways to draw from reference, and we have already explored quite a few of them. This is just another simple approach for you to try. And once you establish the basic shape, you can adjust it, you can transform it, you can make it your own. And remember, you are an artist. You are entitled to transform the world around it. It's part of your job. It's your duty to do that. For instance, I've changed the position of the tail because had I kept it like it was in the original photo, the tail would almost disappear in this style, so it makes more sense to move it like this. Another thing that we are going to be focusing today is light. Even though this style leans towards abstraction, light still matters. Everything we see is defined by light. Without it, there is no image. So instead of thinking only in terms of shapes, colors, or the composition overall, think in terms of light. Consider how light affects what you see. A simple way to approach this is to build in layers. So you start with lighter tones as a base, then you introduce a darker tone to define the main shapes, and after that you add an even darker tone for smaller details. And finally, you can use variations in color to suggest highlights and shadows. It really doesn't get any simpler than this. And even in abstract work, light helps us to identify what's there in the composition we already recognize, okay? Things that we are already familiar with. And ultimately, what we are painting is not just an image. We are painting feelings. Viewers tend to respond more to emotion than to accuracy. We respond more to what we feel than to what we see. We respond to things that we see only if they make us feel something. So that's the focus for today. We will create some semi-abstract portraits, but with a clear attention to how light shapes what we see. Okay, so today I would like to talk about something that sounds simple, but is actually one of the hardest things to learn as an artist: how to see. Not how to look or how to observe, but how to see in a way that doesn't dilute who you are. And more importantly, how this affects your work directly. Because most people don't struggle with lack of inspiration, they struggle with too much of it. There's a pattern that I see constantly, especially in artists who are still trying to define their style. We collect. We collect references, aesthetics, techniques, moods, ideas, and there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. It's part of being human, okay? We are wired to hold on to things that give us pleasure or that we think we might need later. So we live with this constant awareness of the future. We want to feel safe. We want to be prepared. We want to be in control. So we build reserves. However, we tend to keep more, much more than we will ever need, and more than we will ever use. And works, it starts to get in the way of actually enjoying what we have. It becomes less about function and more about accumulation. Sometimes that's physical, sometimes it's emotional, and it can also be visual. Even if you're not a literal hoarder, Most people are emotional holders. We hold on to stimuli because we don't want to feel empty, bored, or disconnected. And that instinct actually makes sense, but it also becomes a problem, not only in art, but in life. Let me give you a concrete example. Living here in Rome and traveling around Italy, I am constantly exposed to overwhelming beauty, okay? Churches, palaces, museums filled with frescoes, sculptures, marble, gold, detail everywhere. Places like the Vatican Museums, they are a visual journey, and we just can't take everything in. Okay, at some point I realized something very important. I can experience all of that without needing to take it with me. I don't need to translate every beautiful thing I see into my work. You don't watch a movie like Amadeus or Dune and then redesign your house around them. Some things belong where they are. They exist to be seen, to be experienced, but not to be collected. And here is one uncomfortable truth. If you bring everything you like into your work becomes unclear. It becomes noisy. It loses identity. At some point, it stops being a style and starts being confusion. There's no hierarchy, no voice. It is just a pile of visual noise. And a good example of this, at least from a listener's perspective, is the Beatles. Whether you like them or not, they reshaped how music is made. And they were exposed to many influences, including Bob Dylan, but they didn't abandon their identity to become Bob Dylan. They fished some elements, especially in songwriting, and you can hear that in songs like Come Together or Across the Universe. The same with Paul McCartney and his interest with classical music. He didn't suddenly switch genres, okay? He integrated elements of that into his existing identity, and that's the difference, okay? This is where seeing actually begins. Seeing is not about liking something. It's not about keeping everything that you like. It is about understanding why you like it. And there are some levels of liking. Okay, you can like something and copy it. You can also like something and try to become it. And also, you can like something and try to extract what resonates with you. And only this third one leads to an authentic work, an authentic voice. So, if your work feels inconsistent, it's probably not because you lack skill, especially if you've been working for a while. You do have these skills, but the more likely reason is this: you are still using your skills trying to be someone else, or worse, trying to be many people at the same time. Every artist you admire is expressing a specific perspective, a specific story, and that's the part that matters. You should be working on yours. If you don't filter what you consume, you end up hoarding visually. Too many references, too many directions, and the result is predictable. Your work doesn't look like you. It looks like everything you have seen recently. And you end up telling borrowed stories, not lived ones. That can work as a form of escape. I've done that quite a few times, but it won't give your work a real identity, okay? So let me try something a little bit more graphic, okay? Let's go a little bit extreme here for a second, okay? I'm pretty sure that you like a few people, but you don't take a physical piece of every person you like. You don't have a jar of collected hair, of collected fingers, or something like that. You might keep a photograph or a small object, but that is not the real thing, okay? What you really carry is emotional. And this goes beyond art. It's the same mechanism behind emotional clutter, okay? Holding on to people, to habits, to environments, to ideas that no longer serve you. And you do it not because they still matter. You do it because you're afraid of having less. But having less is often what creates clarity. It's when you start seeing what you actually have. And more than that, what is that you have that really matters? Not only in art, but in life. So, what do? You don't have to stop looking. You don't have to isolate yourself. You just have to refine your filter. So, next time you see something you love, don't ask, how can I use this? Ask, what exactly is working here? Is it the color, the composition, the restraint, the emotion? Take the principle, not the surface, and apply it to what you are ready to. So, these are the results of what we have done today. I hope you've learned something new today and that you understand better now that you don't need more input. You need better selection. You don't need to collect everything that inspires you. You need to decide what belongs to you. Everything else can stay right there where you found it. Okay. As always, keep on practicing and thank you for joining us.